Okay, I've had several people ask me what pattern I was using for the masks I'm making, and so I'm going to walk you through it step by step. And these particular masks have the opening in the back that you can slip a filter or a separate layer of fabric inside for extra protection, and so that's the kind that we're going to be making today. The first thing is that you're going to need 100% cotton fabric. So this is not a good project to use your vintage sheets on, anything that's got polyester. And you absolutely want to pre-wash and shrink your fabric. I can assume that the hospitals are going to wash all the masks when they receive them for safety, but you definitely want to pre-shrink your fabric, and this is a good one to use up some of your scraps from past projects, which you might recognize some of these from my husband's shirts. So again, 100% cotton fabric. You're also going to need a sewing machine. A serger is completely optional, but definitely a sewing machine. Scissors, pins, or clips. You're also going to need a safety pin and some elastic. And if you're going to do the wire piece, you would need some pipe cleaners or chenille stems and something to cut wire with. But that is completely optional and up to you. You do not have to do the wire piece at the bridge of the nose. That's completely optional. You're also going to need your iron. To begin, you're going to start with the one that you cut two pieces out of, the 7.5 inches wide by 5.25 inches tall. And what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and fold it down about 1/4 inch. Now, if you look, I did a serge seam there. That's completely optional. You can leave the edge raw if you want to. And then what you'd want to do is, if you're looking at them like this, you want to fold over the top of this one and the bottom of this one. This is important if your fabric has a direction, because you want it to be right side up. So again, you're going to fold over the top of this piece and the bottom of this piece about 1/4 inch. Press it real good and then go ahead and stitch that down. Okay, so once you get that stitched down in place like this is what it would look like from the right side. Now again, this pattern goes all crazy, but if you had one that was directional like this, you would still want it to look like this, the pattern be like this. So again, you would finish the bottom edge of the one piece and the top edge of the other so that your pattern went correct. Okay, so the next thing you do is you're going to take your bigger piece, the one that you just cut one of, and then you're going to take your two little pieces and you're going to put them on top of that. And what you want to do is you want to center this. You can measure it if you want to, but I just kind of eyeball. You want to make sure you have the same distance on this side that you have on this side, okay? And then you're going to take the other one, and this would be right sides together, so the two pretty sides kiss like this. And you're going to do the same thing with the bottom pieces. Again, making sure you have the same distance here as you have here, and you just kind of eyeball that. And again, you're going to have the finished edge here and the finished edge here, and they're going to overlap like that. It doesn't matter which one's on top. It really doesn't matter. What you're wanting to do is pin this together here and pin this together here. Again, you want the same distance here on each side so that these are centered, and then go ahead and stitch those in place. Again, you can just clip the edges or you can put pins. And then I take up about 1/4 inch or so seam allowance. Basically, I go to the edge of my presser foot, and I'll show you what I mean by that for seam allowance. Okay, so what I meant as far as seam allowance, I'm basically going right here to the edge of my foot. Right here at this line would be 5/8 of an inch. I'm going a little less than that. It doesn't make a big difference, but you just don't want a huge seam allowance in here. I'm going just about that. Okay, so once you've got those two sewn, you could open it up and it would look like this. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and press these seams open right here. An iron is your best friend if you're a sewer, so always make sure you press these seams nice and flat and open so that you get a nice crisp edge. So we're going to go ahead and do that next. Okay, and as you're ironing, you want to make sure where this overhang is, you want to fold that over and get that nice and pressed too. Down here on both ends, all the way over that overhang, make sure you get that folded over as well and pressed. So once you have these seams pressed open, you're going to fold these two flaps back in, And then you're going to go ahead and press here, nice and flat. And when you press them in, it doesn't matter which one of these flaps is on the top. It absolutely makes no difference. But you just want to make sure that seam's in the center and you get a nice press on both edges here. Okay? For the next step, we're going to go ahead and put in the piece of metal here in the top. Now this is optional. Some people want the mats with the metal in the top, or if not, you can completely skip this step. I'm using pipe cleaner Chanel stems. Some people have used, what you would have the metal in there for is to contour around the bridge of the nose and the tops of the cheeks. But again, if they're wearing this over an N95 mask, which already contours to their face, and this is just over that to protect it, they wouldn't necessarily need this metal piece. So that's up to you and what your needs are. Okay, and the other thing to remember before we put the metal piece in is to make sure that your fabric is going the right way. So you need to assign where the top is if you do have a directional fabric. So we're going to install it into the top center. Okay, and this is the back where the fold is, and then the other side would be the front. And we're going to stitch it right here in the top center, and I'll show you how to do that. You're going to cut your pipe cleaner, your Chanel stem, about 4.5 inches long approximately. You basically want to go over the cheek and around the nose and then to the cheek. So I've figured about 4.5 inches is good. And just make sure that you cut it with scissors or wire clippers, not your good fabric scissors, because that would be awful. Don't do that. So you want to make sure, because there's wire in there, you want to cut it with something that's safe to cut metal with, okay? So then once you've cut it down, the wire is sharp on both of these edges. So you don't want the wire to come poking through the fabric, especially after they've been washed. So you want to just go ahead and fold the sharp edge in, and you can use little needle nose pliers or just do it with your fingers if you're real careful. But you want to make sure that you do that on both ends, fold in that little sharp edge of the wire, okay? Okay, so once you've got both edges folded in like that, you're gonna want to center it on the top piece here, where approximately, I just eyeball it, you can measure it if you want to. And then you're going to want to place a pin here and here so you know what length that is, okay? And we're going to create a channel to basically feed this piece of wire into. So I'm going to put a pin right here and a pin right here. Okay, so once you've got your pins in place, now again, I've got it on the back side, which these two flaps are. You could also pin it on the front. You just want to make sure that the wire piece is centered on the smaller piece, not on the bigger piece, okay? So that's why I'm pinning on the back, but you can certainly pin on the front as long as it's centered on this smaller piece, okay? So once you've got your pins, what we're going to be doing is creating a channel to feed this little chenille stem into. So you're going to actually start by stitching down here approximately 1/4 of an inch or so, and then you're going to stitch across. And the one thing you want to make sure of is that you're making it wide enough that this can feed into there, okay? And when you get to the second pin, you're going to stop. Don't stitch across here yet because you need to keep this open so we can feed this inside, okay? But you just definitely want to stitch down here and then across, again, keeping in mind that it's wide enough to fit this in, and then stop right here. Okay, so here's where I did this downward and then across to create the channel, and again this side is open, so that is where I'm going to feed this. I'm going to go right in here into this opening and feed it right here into this channel all the way until the stopping point. So once you've got it snug in there, as you can see, it's now bendable up there at the top where the nose would go, and then you just need to stitch across here to basically make it so that this can't slide back out of that channel. So you just go ahead and stitch right there to close that channel. Okay, so here's the little channel that we just did. So then our next step, we're looking at this from the back. These are the little flaps, and again, it doesn't matter which one's on top, do it either which way. And what we're going to do is go ahead and stitch close to the edge all the way down here and all the way down here, keeping both of these flaps down. So that's our next step. Stitch here and stitch here, and you can use pins if you need to. Okay, so your next step, this is the front, and you're going to just kind of eyeball. You can measure if you want to, but I'm just going to eyeball. And you're going to fold down one pleat, and then you can use clips or pins and basically just hold your pleat in place with the little clips. And you're going to do this 3 times. And again, I'm just eyeballing the pleats here, just kind of finger making them like this, and then clipping them on each side, and you're going to have 3 pleats going down. Okay, so we created our pleats here. This is the front, and we clipped them in place. You can pin them in place. You want to just make sure that all of them go in the same direction. And then on the back side here, where we've got this overhang, it's actually here on the shorter pieces where you want to top stitch these pleats in place on both sides. So we've got it clipped on the edge, but you actually want to stitch close to the edge right here on both sides to hold these pleats in place. Okay, so once you've got the pleats stitched down, you want to go ahead and press on both sides just to make sure that you kind of lock in these pleats on both sides. And we are on the home stretch, you guys, almost there. Okay, our next step is to finish off the two raw edges here. And if you did the step with the wire, then this would be your top. This is the front, and the back is going to have the opening where the two folds were. And as you can see, we need to fold over this raw edge here, and that's what we're going to do right now. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to fold this in half and then over again to encase that raw edge. As you can see, I've already pinned it in place over here. And we're just going to do the same on both sides. So again, it's kind of hard. I'm holding this with one hand. We're going to fold it over about 1/4 inch like that raw edge in, and then fold it again to encase that raw edge, so you have a nice neat finish like this. Okay, and once you've got this folded over, you do need to have enough width here and stitched here close enough to the edge that you can feed something through this channel, because this is where we're going to either put the elastic or the string ties. So again, you've folded this over and then over again so that the edge is nice and clean, no raw edges. And we're going to stitch really close here to the edge, making sure that this is wide enough that we can fit a safety pin through there and pull our string or our elastic through here on the next step. And also, you are folding over towards the back side, not towards the front. We want our front to be nice and flat, so we're having these folds going over to the back, and the back is again where we have the opening, the flat opening. So you're going to fold these over towards the back. Also, just a reminder, we're just sewing real close to the edge here where we folded this over. We're not stitching across the top or the bottom. We need to leave this open to feed something through. So we're just stitching along the edge right here where we folded these over. We are all done with the sewing portion. The only thing we need to do is feed something through the two edges so that you can actually attach the mask to your face. And you have a few options. This is about 1/8 inch wide elastic. There's also 1/4 inch wide elastic, which you probably don't want to go any wider than 1/4 inch. There's also elastic cording, which comes in different colors. And if you want to tie the mask on, you can also go with ribbon or string. They are asking for something that doesn't fray. So you want to definitely finish off the edges so it's not going to fray out. And you can also burn the edges, but anything that's going to tie on, you want to make sure that it's not going to fray out. You can also use something like a twill tape as well. I've also been told if you are going the method of string instead of elastic, you want to make sure that the lengths are long enough that they can tie them into a bow. Okay, so just keep that in mind if you're going to use string. Okay, some of you sewers may also have bias tape in your stash like I do, and you can also just fold that in half and stitch that and create ties as well out of bias tape. So that'll work as well. And we are going to use a safety pin to feed our elastic or our string through the channels. You probably want a small safety pin. If you have one in your stash, you're going to need that. And if you're a weirdo like me and you've got all kinds of crazy sewing notions, you may also have this, I think it's called a bodkin. I've had this forever. But you can also attach it and then feed it through the channel with this if you don't have a safety pin and you prefer using an instrument like this. And as you are folding this over and creating these two side channels, it is important to visualize the size of your safety pin because it does need to fit through there, as well as the size of your elastic. You need to make sure that it's wide enough so that you can fit that through, because you don't want to get all the way to third base and not be able to come home because you can't fit it through there. So just keep that in mind. It's very important. So if you're going to go the tie method, you go ahead and put the ribbon or the tie, string, whatever, on your safety pin, and then you're going to go ahead and insert it into the side channel and pull it through. So you fed it all the way through, and then you just go ahead and pull it through, and you want to leave enough string on both sides so that they can tie it on. So you would repeat this step on the other side, so there would be a total of 4 ties for them to reach them around and tie them into the bow on the back of their head. And I'm actually not going to do strings on this one, I'm going to do elastic, but the method is similar, but this is how you would do the ties. And again, if you're going the tie method, you don't want the edges to fray, so you can fold them over and fold them over again and stitch them. You can also singe them with a lighter and then fold them over just to keep the edges from fraying out. Okay, for this particular mask, I'm using this pink elastic cording. And if you're using any kind of cording, you definitely want to give it a good stretch. Use like all your might. And if you can snap it and break it, don't use it for your mask. You want to make sure that it's strong enough, because hopefully these will go through repeated wearings and washings, and it needs to be able to hold up to that. And if you're using a thin cord like this and you can't exactly stab your safety pin through it, you can go ahead and just do a simple knot on the bottom of the safety pin and then go ahead and feed it through your channel that way. And it is important to give all of your elastic a good stretch before using it for any project, because elastic does break down over time. And if you're one of the people like me who gets a lot of craft supplies from thrift stores, it can deteriorate. So just make sure that it's got lots of elasticity to it and it's still strong and doesn't stretch out and not give, because you definitely don't want to use it for this project if it won't snap back and hold the mask in place. Again, with the elastic cording, I just tied it onto my safety pin and I fed it through the channel and pulled it through to the other side. And then you're going to get another piece of the elastic and repeat it on the other side. Do the exact same thing. Okay, so now we have fed through the elastic cording on both sides like this, and we've got 2 loose pieces. What we need to do is knot these together, and you want to do a real secure knot, like 3 or 4, and give it a good tug and make sure that that knot's not going to come out on both sides. And again, this is the elastic piece. It's going to be secured around the ears and hold the mask in place. So you want to make sure that it's nice and secure. But because of the way that these masks are constructed, if the elastic was to give or wear out and need to be replaced, it would be easy enough to just feed a new piece through this channel. But again, we're just going to tie knots a few times into each edge here. Different elastic has different elasticity to it, so yours might have more or less stretch than mine. So you just kind of want to eyeball it and kind of give it a give to see how much elastic. This is roughly about 6.5 inches worth of elastic cording from the knot. And then once I've given it, several good knots in there and I've given it a big tug, making sure that knot's not coming out, I'm going to trim off these 2 excess pieces here, okay? Once you've got it knotted off, and you've trimmed off the excess pieces, what you're going to do is pull it so that the knot is hidden inside the casing here, not showing over here where it would rub against their ear. You're going to hide the knot inside here by just pulling this through, okay? So here is our completed mask with the elastic on both sides. And we do have this metal piece here in the top that we can fit around the nose and adjust as needed. And then the most important part on the back, where we had the 2 flaps, now create this opening where you can insert a different layer of material or a filter of some type, basically to help give you more protection there. So that's what's created in the back opening there with the 2 flaps. So there you go. Give yourself a pat on the back. You have completed a fabric mask with pocket opening.